Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast Too Much Disinformation, the pod that uncovers the good, the bad, and the fake of the online world. I'm your host, Rafi Mendelsohn. And this week we're going to be doing something a little bit different because our topic is Albert Einstein. And not just that, but we have Albert Einstein on the show. Well, the voice for Albert Einstein, as Benyamin Cohen, who's our guest today, is the official manager of Einstein's social media accounts, which collectively have more than 20 million followers. He recently penned a New York Times opinion piece titled Einstein and a Theory of Disinformation, which will no doubt be the bulk of our conversation today. Benyamin is the news director of The Forward and was the founding editor of the American Jewish Life magazine. He's the author of the forthcoming book, The Einstein Effect. So let's kick off the show. Hey, Benyamin, how you doing?
Good. Thank you so much, Rafi, for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for making the time to join us. And my first question is going to be, like I do ask every guest that comes on, what was your first ever social media platform?
I think my first social media platform was MySpace. I was one of Tom's many, many friends. And I don't know, should I be worried that it's still out in the digital universe somewhere, like a really old MySpace page for me? I don't know.
So it still exists, but does all of your profile exist still on MySpace? Is it still there for everyone to see?
I hope not, but I haven't touched it in 15 years, so it may still be there.
Maybe they're emailing you still, but it's from
Yeah.
years ago and an old email address. Wonderful. So I've really been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Really excited because actually it's quite a unique perspective. Well, it is a unique perspective that you're going to be talking us through today. And you caught my attention when I read this New York Times opinion piece about Einstein. But actually, before we get into that, which we really will do, I have to ask you the question about, for you, why Einstein? Because I understand your obsession with him began quite a while ago and it's only developed since. So where did that start?
Yeah, I mean, I am not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. I don't know the difference between a quantum mechanic and an auto mechanic, I like to say, and so, I knew about as much about Einstein as all of us do, the wild hair, the Nobel Prize, the E equals MC squared, whatever that means. I didn't know much about him. And then when I was in college, when I was in my 20s, I was reading a book, and the book was about the pathologist who performed Einstein's autopsy. And when he
Wow.
was doing the autopsy on Einstein, he cut open Einstein's head and he took the brain out and he stole the brain. I like to call it the greatest heist of the 20th century. And he
Wow.
kept it, yeah, he kept it in a beer cooler for decades in his basement. And this is an actual, I know we're on a disinformation podcast. This is an actual true story. And you just said, wow. And I said, wow, when I read the book. And I was thinking to myself, how is it possible that we've all learned about Einstein in school, but nobody, no teacher ever taught us the story of Einstein's brain being stolen? And again, it wasn't even Einstein's finger, Einstein's brain, that's what he's known for, his genius, his wisdom. And so I thought to myself, if I didn't know about that, there must be like so many other things about Einstein that we don't know about. And so that kind of set me off on a journey, and I became this Einstein obsessive. And I'm a journalist, and so I'm always looking for stories to write. And so I started writing stories about Einstein. Now, these were stories, modern day stories, where, I set up a Google alert. So every time Einstein was in the news, I would find out about it. And it was things like, scientists who made new discoveries based on Einstein's research, or there was some new technology that was invented that was based on Einstein's research, or even like just a pop culture. There's a movie being made about Einstein, or a TV show being made about Einstein, or people sell Einstein relics. Einstein's like pipe sold for millions of dollars at a Sotheby's auction. And so all of this stuff is always in the news. And so I started writing a lot about Einstein. Meanwhile, the Albert Einstein Archives is run by Hebrew University. Albert Einstein was a co-founder of Hebrew University in Jerusalem. and he left his estate to them. And so his archives, 85,000 papers, the original general theory of relativity is there, his Nobel Prize is there. So he left his archives there. And they're all academics and scientists. They're not social media experts, they're physicists. And so they were looking for someone with a certain kind of expertise to become the voice of Einstein, the official voice of Einstein on social media. And so they stumbled across me and all of my articles, and they're like, this guy knows a lot about Einstein, and more importantly, this guy knows a lot about making Einstein relevant to a modern audience, which is what they were trying to do, trying to get young generation interested in Einstein, not just the scientists but the mass audience. And so they hired me in 2017, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. And what's that like on a day-to-day basis, being the voice of Einstein?
It's, first of all, it's a little scary because, like I said, I'm not a scientist. So I'm always afraid I'm going to post some, sciencey article and it's going to be wrong, and then people are going to make fun. I'm always afraid that like the trolls online are going to make fun of Albert Einstein being wrong. And also it's scary because, I often post from my cell phone, and I have my own Instagram account, my own, Facebook account. I'm always worried I'm going to post a picture of my dog, to Albert Einstein's account. So first off, it's a little scary. But it's an awesome responsibility to be able to speak for him to millions of people. Like you said, he has 20 million fans across social media. He has more Facebook fans than most celebrities, more Facebook fans than Tom Hanks.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
And also the way you describe it, and I know kind of this is a lot about what you've written in your book, is how you can almost describe him like a celebrity, right? Or like a
Yeah.
sports star, or, and he was, named the person of the century in 1999 by Time magazine. Why has he transcended this? We still speak to this day as if he's the biggest global superstar in the world.
Yeah, I like the word you use, transcended. Yeah, I like to call him, he was the first modern day celebrity for sure. He was the most famous person on the planet in the first half of the 1900s. He was everywhere he went. He went to Japan in 1922, stood outside his hotel balcony, and there was tens of thousands of people yelling up at him, like it was the Beatles or something. And paparazzi would chase him down the street. Everyone wanted a photograph. Everyone wanted to interview him. And he didn't understand it. He's like, I'm a scientist. But I think, to your question, I think he exuded this grandfatherly quality, a wise grandfatherly quality. He did not hold himself in high regard. There are many academics or professors, you would be, scared to talk to them. But he just walked around. He used to walk around Princeton in his pajamas. He hated tight clothing and he liked loose clothing. He would walk around in his pajamas. Kids would come up to him and ask him questions. And he was just a very, very approachable person. And so I think a lot of people, put whatever they wanted on him. It was almost like an idol or a worshiping kind of way. They put something on. And he came about at a time, and this is, important for this podcast, where radio was very popular. The intersection, TV was just becoming popular. Newspapers certainly were very popular at that time. And he emerged, and all of these media were able to put him up on a pedestal.
And this is a podcast about disinformation in whatever form it arrives in. But it's important, I think, to remind ourselves that disinformation is not something that started recently. And in your articles and in your writings, you actually talk about how in 1920 his career was almost derailed because of disinformation, way before social media came about.
Yeah. So during World War I, 1915 to 1917 or 1918, he was coming up with his general theory of relativity. And people thought he was crazy. I mean, like you said, fake news nearly derailed Einstein's career. There was 93 German scientists signed a proclamation saying Einstein was nuts. His theory of relativity is nuts. Don't believe it. He's insane. And he had to deal. There was a lot of, during World War I, there was a lot of nationalism. And also people didn't like Germans at that time. So like British scientists were also they weren't even reading Einstein's work at that time because they figured he's an enemy of the state, and we don't even want to look at his stuff. And so anyway, so people were writing manifestos and proclamations and putting up posters around town in Berlin saying, Einstein, his work is crazy. And then it got worse in the lead up to World War II when people were still doing that, but it was started getting a layer of anti-Semitism on top of that. So at that point, theory of relativity had been proven, and many people around the world obviously, accepted it. But at this point, the German scientists were writing fake news about Einstein, and they were publishing books, and they were holding rallies, and German scientists were speaking at these rallies and printing pamphlets with fake news. As a matter of fact, Einstein attended one of these rallies in Berlin, and he walked in. I think he was wearing a hat and a jacket. Like, nobody knew it was him. He kind of went undercover, and he walks into the lobby, and he literally was handed a pamphlet of fake news about Einstein.
Wow.
And he's like, I just don't get how people can be so like stuck in their bubble, and so he really saw this. And so like you said, fake news is certainly not a modern invention, even though we like to think it's something just from the last 5 or 10 years. It's certainly not. It's been around forever. Even I think I put this in my book, even the history of America, when the Revolutionary War was happening, Benjamin Franklin was printing fake newspapers and fake newspaper articles that were, saying fake things about the British Army. This is nothing new at all.
And so in the 1920s, when he faced that, how did he respond?
I mean, he kind of ignored it because he just didn't understand how people could be so stupid. Maybe you could say that's to his detriment. It wasn't actually until other scientists stood up for him, particular a scientist named Eddington in London, who went and gave press conferences and gave lectures about Einstein's theory of relativity, because people liked Eddington, and so they were saying, well, if Eddington says this, then it must be true. So he really had the help of the scientific community, and thankfully for Einstein's legacy, it was only a small minority of people who were putting this fake news out there.
It sounds like one of the earlier instances of influencer marketing, having other people support.
Exactly. Right.
So you speak in this New York Times article, and we'll share the link in the show notes as well, so everyone can see it, as well as links to Benyamin's book as well. You mention about how that as social media manager, as the person, the voice of Albert Einstein, you come across on a regular basis misinformation about him. Either they're saying things that he didn't do, or saying things that he didn't actually say. How often does that happen? How many times a week do you see or read something and they say, according to Einstein, or Einstein said this, and actually you just know it's not true?
How many times a week? How many times a day? How many times an hour? I mean, literally, If I go through my mentions, the Albert Einstein mentions on Instagram and Twitter, at least once an hour, somebody is putting up a fake Einstein quote. I mean, the internet is littered with fake Einstein quotes. And they're just, as as an expert in disinformation, they just get repeated and repeated and repeated. And maybe a legitimate website will post it, and so people believe it's true. There's this, my favorite story of this is Ivanka Trump posted an Einstein quote. And let me just read it to you, because the quote itself was kind of funny for what we're talking about. She posted on her Twitter account, quote, "If the facts don't fit the theory, change the facts." So, and she said that was an Einstein quote. So here she is putting up a quote, about facts and truth. And lo and behold, it was a fake Einstein quote. So, I commented on her post as Einstein. I was like, Ivanka, I never said that. And I put a link in the comments because you know how important it is to provide source material, to provide four sources. It's cute if Einstein says, "Oh, I never said that," but to provide an actual source for people who are viewing her tweet to show that this is not true. So there is an official book put out by the Albert Einstein Archives. I think it's called Quotable Einstein, and it's about an 800-page book, and it's divided into 3 sections: quotes Einstein said, quotes Einstein may have said, and quotes that Einstein certainly did not say. And so you can actually look it up. And if you have like the ebook version of that, the Kindle version, you can actually search on your computer for the quote easily and see if it's in the book or not. So that's what I did. And I posted a link to the book. And I don't know if she bought the book, but but maybe she did.
Wow. So you actually find yourself in a role of being a misinformation fighter, right? You're trying
Yeah.
in your small corner of the internet, you are, the policeman that is trying to make things transparent and fair and truthful.
Yeah. I mean, I can only do so much. I also have to keep in mind that I am, I don't want to use the word pretending, but I am acting as Albert Einstein's voice. So I don't want to get like too political or too snarky, or so I have to do it with class. Sometimes I do, I try to put some humor in there. It's always surprising to people when I comment on people's posts. They're like, "Oh my God, how is Einstein doing this? How does Einstein have a blue check mark? He's tweeting from the grave." And now that we have so many Twitter clones, I just created the other day. I just created an a blue checked Albert Einstein account on the new Threads app. So Albert Einstein, you can find him there as well. Last I checked, he already had several thousand followers on the app.
Actually, yeah. So we're speaking to you today, the day that Threads launched. Within the last 24 hours, Threads, the new social media app, has launched. So forever, anyone listening, that kind of dates the conversation. But I also checked just before, out of interest, and I saw that there was indeed an Albert Einstein Threads account, and you had hit over 15,000 followers. So I presume that's you.
Yes, that is me. I created it. Last I checked, it was only like 3 or 4,000. So I guess we're growing pretty fast.
Fantastic. And and you see that as another way to kind of spread the gospel, another way of getting people involved and interested in his teachings.
100%. We do not have a TikTok account, and that's on purpose. Just because as I'm sure you've discussed on this show, there's a lot of um, things that people are worried about when it comes to TikTok, particularly with the Chinese influence on the app. And so for the time being, at least we are not opening an Einstein account. So if you do see an Einstein account on TikTok, it is not us.
Interesting. And is the challenge of impersonations or kind of fake Einstein profiles, is that something that you come across?
Yeah, so especially since Elon Musk took over Twitter, and especially since he changed the whole blue checkmark verified system, where now anybody can get a check mark and anybody can impersonate anybody. So it's very easy. Our Twitter account, for example, is just at Albert Einstein. One word. But anybody can create an account. I hope I'm not giving people ideas now, but anyone can create a blue check mark that says Albert _. Einstein or Albert Einstein Nobel Prize winner or whatever the new username would be. The problem is, and I mean, the good thing is that they don't have a lot of followers. I mean, so if you go onto Twitter and you see at Albert Einstein, it has close to 1 million followers, and this fake account only has 5 followers, then I think people can easily see. But it goes back to the whole concept of media literacy. You and I are very in touch with this topic, but the average person, the average news consumer sees something online and they don't know to look at the things that you and I would look for. Like I just said, the follower count. So I think it's important to teach people about media literacy. My wife is a college professor and she studies the psychology of social media, and she has a whole class that she gives to her students. Here are some things you should look for when you're looking at an article online. Is it from a reliable source? What's the date on the article? Is it 3 years old or is it from today? Just simple things that people may not think to look at.
And I bet when you started this journey, you didn't think that would be something that you came across, or maybe you would. The how much trust can we place in what we're reading? Is that also, as a journalist, how much do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I thought I'd be posting, fun Einstein memes and fun Einstein, photos and things like that, which I certainly do. But especially because I'm a journalist, I look to it with, everything I look at is with a fine tooth comb, and I'm extra cautious. All you have to do, online is make one mistake and the trolls will come out and people will mock you. And so it's like so much more important to as we say in the States, cross your T's and dot your I's, and make sure, everything is perfect before people see it. Because as you know, people will pounce on it, and people will politicize it, and people will use it against you.
Yep, and it's also up there forever, right? Someone
Right.
recently was made a really good point in saying that you should write as if your future generations are going to read it, because they are. It's going to be up there. There is a permanency
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we talk about truth and trustfulness, I have to ask, just like time is relative depending on your frame of reference, is it possible that truth is relative? How do we think about that challenge?
I mean, I think, like, at the end of the day, truth is not relative, but I think, it, you know, from more practically speaking, I do think truth is relative. I mean, you look at just, the differences, the chasms between the right and the left in the United States. And I have family members who I talk to at the dinner table, and it's like we are literally living in two different worlds. So they think X is true and I think Y is true. And we could talk for hours and hours and hours, and we are never going to cross that bridge. And it's mind-boggling to me, that we can live in such an environment. And it's obviously because of so many factors. They live in a filter bubble. I live in my filter bubble. I'm reading these new sources. They're reading those news sources. I only think it's going to get worse. I mean, we're just getting more and more fractured and more divided, unfortunately. So if Einstein can place, that's why I think Einstein is so important, is because no matter who you are, I think across cultural divides, across political divides, young, old, Republican, Democrat, if you live in Istanbul or you live in Illinois, everybody looks at Einstein as this beloved character who is wise and is seeking answers and universal truths in the world. And so he is kind of held up as this arbiter of truth. And so it's all the more reason I need to be careful with what I post.
Amazing, the iconoclast that he's become today. And if he were alive right now, what do you think he would make of the challenge of disinformation?
I think, like we said, we have historical record of him looking at misinformation in his own era and saying, "I can't believe this is going on. How can people be so stupid?" So I think he would be, on CNN, as a talking head saying, "I can't believe people believe this stuff. It's just not true." I just think he would be flabbergasted and frustrated, to be
Mm.
honest.
But
Yeah.
he's also quite solutions orientated, and maybe now we have a better appreciation of the scale and the challenge as well, that we have to possibly be a little bit more proactive in terms of fighting it. So how do you think he would fight it?
I do think you're right. He was a big humanitarian, and I'm not saying disinformation is a humanitarian issue, but he did speak out. That's more so, in my opinion, more so than his science. He's known for what he's fought for in the humanitarian world. He fought to save his fellow German Jews when he immigrated to America in 1933. He set up the International Rescue Committee to save his fellow German Jews, and he helped Jews immigrate in the lead up to World War II. And then when he moved to America, he was also very involved in the civil rights movement, and he was very involved in the movement. He was a pacifist. He hated war, and so he was, trying to stop nuclear war and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So I think he would use his pulpit, he would use his social media followers, and he would, speak out against what he saw as bad things. And so certainly I think he would. You're right. He probably would go to college campuses and give big talks about the problems of misinformation, and he would try to use his platform in that way.
And I recommend to everyone listening that they should start following both Einstein, but also Benyamin Cohen on all of his channels that he's on. Tell us a bit about the book that you've written.
Yeah, the book is called The Einstein
Oh,
Effect.
there
I'm
it
holding
is.
it up for those people who are watching the video of this podcast. It's called The Einstein Effect, and it's basically um, it's about the modern day relevance of Einstein. I want to show people, and there's science in it, but I also want to show people how Einstein's fingerprints are all over our daily lives. So one of my favorite examples in the book is, you know, we've talked about Einstein's theory of relativity, and most of us don't understand it, but we all understand GPS. We all have GPS in our cars and our phones, and we use GPS all the time, whether we're driving somewhere and need directions, or if we're on a dating app and we're swiping to see who's in our neighborhood. All of that uses GPS. And the foundation of GPS is the theory of relativity. I won't go into all the science, but basically you're moving in your car, the earth is spinning, and the satellites in space are moving. So all three of those elements are moving, and Einstein came up with the calculations to square all of those three elements so that we can get to the place we need. If you did not have Einstein's GPS, your car would veer off 7 miles each day.
Wow.
So like we really need Einstein's GPS. So that's just one chapter in the book where I show how Einstein is still relevant today. And I also talk about the brain being stolen. I actually tracked down the brain. That's the end of that story. As I mentioned, the guy kept it in a beer cooler for decades in his basement, and nobody knew where it was. And I tracked it down, and I went and I got to hold the brain. It's in a jar. It's in a glass jar, and I got to hold the brain, and it was just, I mean, it was almost like a spiritual experience because, we've been talking about how Einstein's brain is what represents, so much of who Einstein was. It was his genius and his knowledge. And here I was, it was, the last physical vestige of Albert Einstein, and I was holding it in my hands. It was such a crazy experience. So I wrote about finding that brain in the book.
Incredible. Where is it today?
I can't give you the address of where it is, but it's actually in Princeton University. There's a man there. The pathologist died in 2007. The guy who stole it, and he gave it to somebody else in Princeton. And I found out who had it, and he let me come and see it. It's actually cut up into. I don't want to get gory, but it's actually cut. The brain is cut up into over 200 small pieces, because the guy was sending pieces all over the world to scientists to determine if Einstein's brain was unique in some special way. So it's all a bunch of little pieces in the jar. I almost asked the guy if I could take a piece, but I didn't.
A piece of his brain. I'm sure
Yeah.
everyone listening who started this pod and thought, "Oh, I wonder what this is going to be about," didn't expect that they would be hearing about pieces of Einstein's brain and where are they now. But I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and also for, in your corner of the internet, from your unique perspective, the work that you're doing in terms of educating and making it still relevant today more than ever, but also fighting some of those mistruths and misinformation. We end each podcast episode by asking the same question to each of our guests that come on, to name us. We set them a challenge to name us one good thing, one bad thing, and one fake thing that they're seeing in the online space at the moment.
So yeah, it was a tough. You gave me a homework assignment. So one good thing that I'm enjoying online is the resurgence of newsletters. So nowadays, obviously there's lots of news sites, there's social media, but in the last 3 to 5 years, I think newsletters have kind of had this renaissance, and you could sign up for newsletters, in any topic you're interested in. And, oftentimes they're written, by a news outlet or by a journalist you like, and you can really develop this relationship. So in particular, I'll just give one that I really like is there's a news organization called Puck, Puck, and they have a bunch of really, brand name journalists working there, and each one writes a newsletter on a different topic. And I subscribe to 3 or 4 of those newsletters, and it's like on Hollywood, on the media, on the technology. And I just feel like I have a connection with these people, and they're just super knowledgeable, and I look forward to reading them. So I think that's one good thing I like that I'm liking right now.
Amazing.
One bad thing, I think maybe I'm giving the same answer your previous guests have given, but I would say Twitter, especially, the week we're talking, Twitter has, put caps on how many tweets you can read. And I just think the whole Twitter is crumbling right before our eyes. And it's sad because I think Twitter is a powerful tool, and I think it's gone to the garbage. And like we said, maybe Threads will be a good competitor for it. And then what was that? Oh, one fake thing. So one fake thing that I'm enjoying online, if I could say I'm enjoying something fake, is the proliferation of not just artificial intelligence, chatbots and things like that, but in particular, the artificial intelligence that allows you to create new pieces of art. So I've been playing around with something called Midjourney, and you can type in, the better prompt you give them, the better result you'll get. So you can type in and if you follow Albert Einstein on Instagram, you'll see these. But if you type in, Albert Einstein walking down a street in New York City, in the style of Andy Warhol, in the style of an Andy Warhol painting, wearing a yellow bow tie or whatever. You can be super specific. And the results that they send you back, the pieces of artwork that they send you back are just, I mean, they're mind boggling. They're amazing. I think that it's so incredible. And so I've been posting a lot of these to Albert Einstein's Instagram account. And I'm just really enjoying playing around with that. And so that's one fake thing that I actually enjoy.
Amazing, amazing. And I think we speak and we hear a lot about the dangers of Gen AI, but the horse is bolted, right? We're using it,
Right.
and also it's not all bad. Like, we can have fun with it, and there's some
Yeah.
really interesting, fun, useful, practical applications. And this is one because you are he continues to be in pop culture, and you're still sparking the imaginations of future generations as well. So fascinating, really interesting. Thank you again, Benyamin, for coming on the episode, on the podcast. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time. Bye, guys.